Let's have a conversation about how the European Union is changing the way it talks, the language, the wording, the tone, how it talks about migration. We've just had this announcement of what the EU is calling return hubs.
The proposal provides a legal framework for the establishment of return hubs in the third countries for individuals who have received final return decisions. Any such hub will operate under very strict conditions with clear guarantees and exclusions for unaccompanied minors and families with minors.
1 out of 5 people who are told to leave the European Union actually leave the European Union, and that is not acceptable. Not acceptable for us, not acceptable for all Europeans.
Now, I don't really want to talk about the specifics of those return hubs. We've known about it for a while. The European Commission talked about it. I want to talk about how they're being talked about. I think that's an interesting aspect of this whole conversation. And to get into this with me, I've got Ciara Bottomley.
Hi, Jack.
Hey, Ciara. It's great to have you on. So I think firstly, we should say who you are in this context, because you're a person who has worked for a number of different organizations. You have a very specific perspective on migration. You're talking to me in your personal capacity, an organization which defends the rights of people in these kind of return hubs, right? And perhaps you want to explain a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I'm working in communications. I'm working for an NGO at the moment, but prior to that, I worked for the European Commission and for the European Parliament. And at the European Commission, I worked specifically on migration, so in their communications department. So I was very interested to see how they decided to present these proposals. And one of the things that particularly struck me was a couple of days before they presented them, the Commissioner for Home Affairs, Magnus Brunner, said that the proposals themselves, the idea behind them was to give people the feeling that they were back in control of what's happening in Europe. And to me, that really struck me, because I think this is interesting. I feel like this is the first time the Commission is kind of saying the quiet part out loud, you know, that it doesn't really matter if these proposals work, if they see the light of day, if they are tried and failed in the past, because let's be honest, there's plenty of evidence from the UK and the Rwanda deal, Italy, Albania, from Australia, Papua New Guinea, that show that these kind of schemes don't actually work. So I thought it was very interesting to hear them talking about that they were really just to give people the feeling that they were in control.
So you part of the reason why I'm doing this video is because I saw a tweet stream thread. Can't talk today. Literally lost all my words. A tweet thread where you sort of looked through, and you're doing personally in your personal capacity quite a lot of different looks at how media is reporting on a lot of different things. And obviously, as a journalist myself and as a working journalist, I'm super interested in it. I know that there are choices behind this. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of what you saw that prompted you? Why did you decide to sort of publish that thread? I'll put a link to the thread in the description of the video as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was keen to see how journalists were going to take these proposals, because they were rushed through, right? The Commission just agreed, the EU just agreed the new pact on migration at the end of the last mandate. Now this mandate, they've decided to kind of open the whole thing up again and push through these really drastic, really draconian measures in the first 100 days. So I was keen to see how the media were going to report on it, whether this feelings thing was going to come up also in how they were talking about it. So one of the things that it did, yeah, I mean, it was in Politico. Sarah Wheaton reported on it. It was then, Politico, I think some of their reporting was really great, actually. They were very much went with the line that this is a gift to the far right. So they were very much on the kind of this is more politics than policy sort of framing. Elsewhere, I mean, I think that the NGOs and the kind of the critical aspects of these proposals was well reported in places like Reuters and The Guardian and the Irish Times. It obviously got a lot of coverage all over Europe. It was big news, basically. But what I was keen to see was kind of what some of the language that was being used around it, whether it was going to be seen as something new and innovative as the way that the Commission was pitching it, or whether journalists would see through this as something that has been tried and failed before. And I think across the board, there was quite a lot of kind of comparisons to these other schemes that have failed in the past that I'm sure the Commission would not want people to be trying to compare them to, because the thing is, they're trying to differentiate what they are proposing from what has been done in the past. But I think overall, that strategy maybe didn't really work for the Commission.
Yeah, I say this as a member of the press pack myself, and not this isn't necessarily on the Commission. Maybe it is, I don't know, maybe, but like, we've sat through a lot of proposals, a lot of different things. You know, when the crisis, in inverted commas, in 2015 started, and I did tons of reporting, I was, you know, all over the Western Balkans, following all of that stuff, and have done since many years. We've seen a lot of proposals on migration things, and, you know, the resettlement program in the Juncker Commission didn't get the numbers, didn't work. We see, like you say, the Albania thing didn't work. There's millions of euros have been spent on that. Meloni just cannot get it through, even through her own, you know, they're trying to control their own courts in Italy. The Rwanda plan, the Tories fought so hard in the United Kingdom to get that through, obviously not in the EU. And it's not like necessarily our opinion as journalists, whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing to do these schemes. It's just, we've seen it a lot, and people have seen it a lot. And so I wonder whether tapping into the feeling thing, like you said, I mean, judges don't care about feelings at the end of the day. And if this comes down to it, there could be some court cases against this stuff, right? You actually, I know you've got a background in law.
Yeah, I mean, the feelings thing, I think it's to go back to it again, you know, do we have any other policy that's created on feelings? You know, do we have fiscal feelings or environmental feelings? You know, like, we expect from our policymakers evidence-based policy. We expect them to look into what's worked, not just based on, you know, maybe people are feeling fed up with migration. And I think that, you know, actually, if you speak to a lot of people in Europe these days and you try to tap in to what they might be feeling.
You're getting a lot of emails here, mate. We can hear it. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry. Everyone's like, oh my God, Ciara's going to have a ton of emails after this. But sorry, carry on. Tap on. We don't make policy. Well, I don't know if I disagree with, I don't know if I agree with you all the time there. Things like, things like economic policy can often be done through feeling, that people feel they're richer, that they feel they're stronger. That is something that often those kind of policies are based on. The economy is an invented, made up, you know, piece of fiction, basically, and it's all done on feelings. That's what Yanis Varoufakis would say. Anyway, but
I mean, you know, when you're suggesting something like building a ton of centres outside the EU, you would presumably want people to look at whether this is going to work, whether there are going to be legal challenges, how much it's going to cost. And, you know, we've got evidence that it didn't work before. So I've, you know, personally, I just, this feelings thing just really jumped out at me. And it was something that I was then curious to see, if others felt the same way, and if others were seeing the same thing, that this is really something that is far more political than actually good policy making.
What do you think the EU should be doing then, if not return hubs to try and prevent people from coming in? Like, what policy would you put forward?
I'm personally just tired of the conversation that we've been having on migration for the past 10 years. You know, it's been pitched as something to worry about, some kind of threat, a security threat, you know, a threat to people's jobs, you know, things like that. And I think it's really a shame. And I think it's quite sad, because what we've built the European Union on is freedom of movement, you know, and we've seen the benefits of that. You and we both went on Erasmus years. Yeah. We are migrants. We live in Brussels. We are migrants. Yeah. And this is, well,
I'm actually not a migrant anymore. I am a citizen of Belgium.
You are a citizen. Okay, well, yeah. I am a migrant. And I just feel like, you know, why can't we be proud of this system and extend it to others? Why do we have to frame it in such sort of negative, enforcement-based, detention-based kind of terms?
But from the Commission's point of view, this is the realpolitik. This is what the member states, and even maybe not incumbent governments, but this is what people are talking about. This is why the AfD do well in Germany. This is why Meloni is successful in Italy, and all of these different political factions. And so essentially the council told the Commission that they could move forward on this. This was the suggestion, right? This was an idea that didn't only come from the Commission. It was approved for moving forward these return hubs. So this is part of the conversation. The council is not going to reject this idea, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of push back on that a little bit, because I mean, we go back to feelings again, right? These parties that are anti-migration, they're responding to what they perceive, or they're, I don't know, depending where you sit, I think they're personally pushing this idea of anti-migration, but others might say that they're responding to an anti-migration sentiment. But I think really, if you break things down with people and you say, well, what is the threat here? You speak to somebody on the street and they might tell you that they're very frustrated with the way things are. And I can fully appreciate and understand that. But, what else we could be talking about is the fact that, okay, we've had migration crisis for the past 10 years, but what else have we had? We've also had a sort of stagnation in living standards, which is equally frustrating for a lot of people. And I think if you talk to people and you say, okay, why are you really frustrated with migrants? What they might tell you instead is, well, actually, it's that, I'm struggling to get an appointment at the doctor's, or my kid can't get swimming lessons, or that kind of thing. And so actually, it's really a case of maybe redirecting people's anger from migration onto, I need to invest in public services, I would say.
Is that, just to wrap this up quickly, is that a case of language? I mean, that's where we started.
I mean, I would say communications-wise, I think it's important to talk about these things. I think, I would say that migrants have been scapegoated for the past 10 years for a lot of the ills that are facing the European Union. And this has been a choice that's been made by successive governments across the board. So I do think that, different parties who want to kind of push back on this idea that migration is some kind of problem to be solved could really be talking about the other problems that need to be solved, which are things like housing, healthcare, social security. And these things are about to get probably even worse for people if rearmament EU goes ahead and we face a whole ton of other austerity measures going forward.
And in the global context as well, we'll see what big factors can affect the economy as well. Nate, this was really interesting. Thanks so much for joining. I'm really, really grateful. It's super interesting to get your insights.
Thanks, Jack. Good to chat to you.
So that was just one perspective. Ciara's got a really clear understanding of how the European Union talks about this, but she has a particular point and a particular point of view. What do you think? Do you agree with her? It'd be really interesting to get to know a little bit about whether you think and some of the stuff you're reading has seen the language change, and what you think about that proposal for the EU's return hubs. Take a study.